are extremely privileged to have you all join us on another edition of Judicial Service Conversations, our reggae conversations. Are extremely honored that you're here, and today we meet to talk about justice that is not measured by distance, delayed by scarcity, or denied by poverty. Today we meet to, as we always do, to discuss how people can have access to justice. Today we meet at an interesting time, at a historic time in the development of the legal sector in Uganda, at a time when bar and bench relations could not be lower, when backlog could not be a bigger problem, and when we are continuing to advocate for the appointment of mission-based judges. The idea that the people must be at the center of our justice system. And I am honored to say that, as usual, we have our usual hosts, myself, Alfred Makabai, Alfred Muyaka. Alfred Muyaka, I called him Makabai because I wanted to make sure that he was alert. And I was actually about to call Mercy Muyaka, but Mercy Makabai. Mercy Makabai, we also have Joy today joining us. And we are discussing a mighty and powerful issue of access to justice. Our guest today is no less a gentleman than Mr. Gerald Abila. Gerald is a man who has acted with humility but also with extraordinary purpose. He has built a platform called Barefoot Law that many of us know about, who has brought free legal aid to thousands of people using radio, WhatsApp, and now even artificial intelligence, actually pioneering AI in Africa. He created someone called Winnie. I don't know why he didn't call her Eve, but we'll come to that. He created someone called Winnie, who was the world's first AI lawyer. He has, from Kampala to being a TED speaker, to the World Economic Forum at Davos. He's a global voice for innovation, for justice. He has been honored across continents, but he remains grounded in one mission, that he shall be a barefoot lawyer, walking the streets, walking the country and bringing justice to those who need it. He has gotten the applause of the World Economic Forum, the American Bar Association, the King Baudin Foundation. But I think it's no exaggeration to say that the highest honor he has got is from people who had no access to justice, whom he made sure had that access. And so tonight I am extremely honored on behalf of the team at Judicial Service Conversations and on behalf of our loyal listeners to welcome none other than Gerald Abila. Gerald, you are most welcome to Judicial Service Conversations.
Thank you, Ellison. Just a little correction. The thing with being an African is you're often reduced into a box of Africa. You know, so in your introductions, a lot of the pioneering work that has happened across access to justice in Uganda with Barefoot Law and beyond is not work that is limited to Africa, but it's work that benefits the world as a globe. So in our conversations, many of the solutions we're developing are solutions for humanity, not only solutions for Africans. So we should correct that misconception. We always end up, if we're always speaking for Africa, then who is speaking for the world? These are spaces we negate from ourselves, and then we get offended or fight because we feel we are being pushed out, and yet it's us pulling back. So a lot of these solutions are solutions for the world. Barefoot Law was a pioneer in the world. The lessons we've shared are lessons for the world. Winnie was the first in the world, just like so many other innovations that have happened across access to justice in Africa. So I wanted to start off with that correction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As you can hear, our guest is not just a lawyer, he's a global citizen. He's a globetrotter who solves the problems of humanity, because access to justice is a problem. Now, I want to introduce to you other global citizens. We have Joy Mbabazi just next to you there. She's also a global citizen. We have Mercy, not Muyaka, but Makabai, and Alfred Makabai. Alfred Muyaka. Alfred Muyaka. We have Alfred Muyaka. And we're going to have a conversation with you. And I like that perspective, that what we are talking about are global challenges from a global village. We have been very limited to a small corner of this global village. And we are going to have a few questions about our small corner. I hope you will bear with us, Gerard, this. But I'll ask Alfred to start us off with the first question. Alfred is our co-host.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Isoni, for that. My name is Alfred Muyak de Makaba. I don't know whether my hold is prophesizing some other things, but I'm also going to but that's a story for another. But this question is going to be amazing, because just the first 3 lines I'm already inspired. So I'm no longer dreaming for Uganda. I'm now serving humanity globally. So these are solutions which Barefoot Law gives, solutions for not even Africa alone, but for the world. And most importantly, for humanity. But before we go to that bit, people know Barefoot Law and what it does, but few even know the founder, so as the person. And I think I should thank you that the brand is bigger than the person, which is some other people, the brand is attached to the founder and you don't even get to know. Once the founder is not there, the brand dies. But with this brand being bigger than the founder, it really speaks to what Barefoot Law has done. So, but before you go to that, what Barefoot Law has done, now I just want to know the person as Gerard Yabira. Who is Gerard? The school life, the young lawyering bit, starting off in the legal career. Maybe before you go to Barefoot Law, I want to know who is Gerard Yabila. What makes him tick? What inspires him? What makes him to wake up even those days when he feels like today I should just sleep? But there's that mission which makes you to wake up. And what has been your journey, at least to this part of the lawyer part? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how much time we have.
No, we have all the time. And as you said, you rarely meet Mr. Elson because he's a bit busy.
Yeah.
And even
now
us, now you have him. And we have him for all the time you need. So whole evening, we don't plan to get anywhere very soon. We just have our coffee until because this is going to be another masterclass. From the first lines, you're already now dreaming for humanity and dreaming for the world. You're already inspired, so you have the time to answer everything. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think I like to describe myself as a human being, first and foremost. In these days of technology, in these days of an attention economy, we forget our collective humanity. And that's the inspiration behind the Barefoot Law name and the logo. The barefoot in the name is a foot that is pure. You come out without shoes. You go to your parents' bedrooms without shoes. You go to a place that's holy without shoes. And that's the attitude, an attitude of purity that we should approach the law. but it's also an attitude of purity that we should approach our lives. It's an attitude of humility, I would like to say. And that's partly why, like you said, the brand is bigger than me as an individual. I'm a human being, a Ugandan born and bred, a lawyer of the courts in Uganda. I am a social entrepreneur, an innovator, but I also like to think of myself as a legal futurist, both in thought, in actions, and sometimes in deed. I think if it was possible, I probably would travel through time to try and see some of these things. So the conversation we'll have today is, I wouldn't want us to talk for the audience today. I want us to try and talk for an audience that will be listening to us 50 years from now. And I want us to try and chart a path forward, to try and overcome some of these challenges that we're facing now, hoping that we will correct things that may arise 50 years from now. So I want us in this room, and for the audiences that are listening, let's extrapolate ourselves from this presence and try to journey into the future and see the solutions that we are coming up with, the suggestions we're coming up with. Are they suggestions that will make sense to our children's children, that hopefully will listen to this broadcast 10, 20 years from now? If they don't make sense, then we've not achieved what we hope to achieve. If it makes sense, if they refer to this conversation 25 years from now, one generation, then probably it will have made sense. So I think as we're addressing this, let's try and extrapolate into the future. You asked about what makes me tick. Honestly, again, I don't think I'm tick. I think I'm a dreamer, really. And I think part of my source of strength is my parents. My mom is a school teacher, so she always used to bring these books home that enabled us to dream. There's a lot of books that we read as children. Aesop's Fables, you know, Jack and the Beanstalk, and books like that. And my dad is a scientist. He's a plant professor, a plant pathologist. Fun fact, back in the 80s and in the 90s, Uganda was going through a famine because there was a virus that had wiped out cassava, especially in the east. And my dad and a group of other scientists stayed and developed a cassava variety that resisted, that would not get affected by the cassava mosaic. And I remember as children, we had to run away from the east. I was born in Soroti. We had to flee Soroti because of the war. But my dad stayed at a research station in Serere to make sure he doesn't destroy his samples. So he stayed, and so many years later, he was able to develop a variety of cassava that resists cassava mosaic, and that's how the famine sort of came to an end. He's Professor Tim Nape. He's a scientist, and so that combination of a scientist and a teacher is what sort of inspires and draws attention. But again, there's a lot of inspiration from mentors. And I was just saying, I remember the first law firm I went to was KAA. And it was strange because I was at LDC, hustling as usual, trying to get out of LDC. And clerkship time comes. And I just see my name on a list at the administration building. 5 of us have been selected to go to KAA for clerkship. The truth is I'd never heard of KAA. I didn't know where KAA was. So I'd never. So I climbed on the board. I went to Nakasero and saw the officers, picked my letter, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in a legal profession. One of the things that I remember clearly from the partners at KAA, I remember we asked one of them this question. I forget who it was, because we used to meet the partners in the first week. We're like, yeah, what makes KAA tick? What makes you tick in the legal profession? And he said, do what you do and do it well. But then I modified it later to do what you do it well, and do it on time. And that will make you tick. So I think that's a message for young lawyers especially that are coming into the legal profession. What makes you tick, especially in your early years of the legal profession? Do what you do it on time, and do it well. Give it your best, and trust me, you'll thrive.
I think my questions have been answered. At least I know that bit of the Gerard who does what he does well and does it on time. So you can go to the questions on barefoot land, everything. I cannot have a conversation. Yes.
Before we go to that, something again on mentorship.
Yes.
And it's something I've been thinking about. If you want your kids to grow up into professionals that you would admire, it starts with you as the parent. You know, especially for young lawyers and especially for many of us that still have kids that are young. Fatherhood has only one role model. So many. Womanhood has so many. Motherhood has only one role model. So have that in mind, and that's especially not to the young lawyers per se, but to those that are a bit advanced in the legal profession. The professionals that you're molding in future will start by seeing you. How are you as a father? How are you as a mother? So if you're not playing that role, don't expect to produce professionals that are tick in future. So the first place for mentorship, even for lawyers, even for individuals, is home. So the first mentors are you. Don't think you're going to be a lousy mentor and hope someone else will raise your kid to be such a good lawyer. There will always be something lacking. So carry that. That's if you want someone to be tick in future, start off with a mentorship, and it starts at home. Be a good father, be a good mother. The rest we will get from books and from observation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Gerard. I can tell you that Alfred has people who are watching who want him to be a mentor in that department, and he has taken a good lesson. But you know, I'm fascinated at the cassava mosaic story and the idea of really problem solving. And when I look at it years later, it becomes barefoot law. To also solve judicial mosaic, to solve the problem of justice mosaic. And barefoot law, the organization you founded, has become a bit of a global and continental and national beacon for access to justice through technology. So before we delve into the deeper topics, let's just understand barefoot law. What is it? How did you get the idea to found it? How did you imagine it would grow? Just for the many people who are listening who have never heard of barefoot law, just tell us very briefly the barefoot law story.
Depends on how much time we have, but briefly, a bit of what Barefoot Law is. Barefoot Law is a non-profit organization founded in Uganda whose primary tool for overcoming access to justice challenges we face is leveraging digital technology and innovations. The problems of access to justice are many. The solutions are many, only if we can dream and if we can be bold enough to approach them. Of this access to justice pie, the problems that we saw are people just don't have access. There are challenges accessing justice. These challenges are brought about by distance. People are located so far away from a justice access point. The challenges are brought about by culture. Some culture does not encourage access to justice. It's, using legal terms, it's repugnant. People have phobia. phobia for the law and phobia for technology. And that also affects access. But I think the biggest challenge is cost, and that is economic. So the question for us is, how do we use technology to overcome these four main challenges in access to justice? And so through digital technology, Barefoot Law makes the law available to people like this. And the model is simple. We get the law, we simplify it, and we broadcast it. And then our team of lawyers is available on hand to provide solutions. We were established in Uganda 12 years ago, and we've since expanded to Kenya, Malawi, Zambia, and The Hague in Netherlands. Since our founding, we've handled over a million cases, and we've pioneered a lot of things. Like you said, that AI system, Winnie, was pioneered before we even using terms like AI. And yeah, we're Ugandans, and we are human beings. Yeah. So anyone that wants to access us can get in touch with us online or by visiting one of the virtual centers we've set up across the country. Our services are free of charge. We are pro bono. And our goal we used to have goals for 2030, but things have changed so much. By 2030,
the Law Society has goals for 2060.
Yeah, I think we also need to get a bit long term. But by 2030, one of our two main goals is to make the law ubiquitous. In case anyone has a problem, they should think of using the law to prevent that problem or using the law to resolve that problem when it arises. And then we thought by 2030 we would have an AI lawyer that's as accurate or more accurate than a human being. But that's something that's available today, 6 years before time, not for us, but globally, as you can see. And yeah, so that's Barefoot Law in a nutshell. You asked a question about
The founding idea.
the founding idea was, I think it started in my childhood because of all these conflicts I told you about. I think one of the questions that kept lingering in my mind was, how do these things happen? How do we get to a point where we are resolving problems using violence, using conflict? And in searching for answers, I landed on the law. I mean, the law is not perfect, but it's the best tool we have to resolve problems at grassroots level. And if we amplify, if we create and develop this problem solving at scale, then we're able to create a society that's peaceful, in which people can thrive, not only in Uganda, but globally. So that is, that's part of the inspiration. And honestly, I didn't think Barefoot Law would become the institution that it is today. It was a lot of luck, I would say, and a lot of persistence. But it was an idea that formed into an institution. But was there a plan? No. Were we trying out things? Yes. Did we have a theory of change? And nothing. We just went out and did things, and thank God it worked out.
Wow. That is a whole story and picture of what persistence can really make, and see us right now being a part of the global, what did we call it? The global, this whole conversation. So you've talked about the law being a tool that you're using to solve real problems and challenges. And I like how you introduced yourself and said you're a human being, first of all, which is really amazing, and a different way, I think, to start looking at ourselves going forward. But then I want to take you back to, you've talked about Winnie. And so I think we want to understand why Winnie. Why did you not give it another name, and what does it mean? Would like to give us a brief background of that innovation, and then also you can share with us what problems Winnie was created to solve. I think you've hinted a bit on it. Maybe you could expound on it and how she has changed the legal landscape so far for ordinary citizens, which you've also hinted on a bit, but now you could expound on that. This is since inception up to today. Thank you.
Yeah, I think something else is the ultimate law is humanity. You know, it's something we tend to forget as lawyers. The ultimate law is humanity. No one will teach you how to cry as a child. The moment you're born, you'll be slapped once and you'll start crying. No one will teach you how to suckle. Whichever mammal it is, it will suckle. No one will teach you how to love. No one will teach you how to hate. Whichever society you go to, people will love and people will hate. And whichever society you go to, death is looked down upon. It is something we will all mourn for. But life and love is something we will celebrate. And that is something we forget. The law is like that. The law is our collective humanity. I guess before we even go into the technology, one question we should ask ourselves is if the current legal system we have today is a representation of our humanity as Ugandans. There be a connect? Could there be a disconnect? Is that maybe an area we need to examine a bit more before we start going into solutions? I hear people talking about technology. We've been in this field. Technology is a representation of our best or our worst selves. Winnie is one of those technologies, and Winnie started developing Winnie in 2015. And by that time, it was crazy. It was such a crazy idea that I think many called us mad because the technology for something like this was impossible. And I would be asked, what do you want to do? And I would say, I want an AI lawyer. And they say, no, that's not possible. And I would start narrating movies and things like that, and it's not possible. And that journey took me all across the world. I went to Belgium. I asked, does anyone have this technology to give me this? They directed me to France. I went to France. No one had the technology. Someone directed me to the US. I went to the US from universities in the East Coast to New York, an entire road trip to the West Coast from New York, Colombia. I went to Newark, where the IBM offices were. I went to the Silicon Valley, to Facebook, to Google. I met Watson, the best AI by then around the world. But the system they had was so rudimentary by then. No one had yet come up with the technology that we have today, the LLMs, the large language models. And so by luck, I heard about a center for math in Germany at a place called Dagstuhl. And I went there. Now, we had already started advancing, and this was in 2019. I spent a week in Dagstuhl with some of the leading technology people from around the world, from Google, from Microsoft, from DeepMind, and we spent a week. The whole week I was trying to explain to them what I was looking for, and it didn't make sense. But then on the second last day, we had a breakthrough using some advanced Python programming, and were able to put in one of the cases that came in and saw an output. And the output was, this machine was trying to talk, but in weird ways. But me, being a lawyer and knowing Ugandan context, I could make sense of those words. Kayunga, police, child, report. But so the team came and it's like, does this make sense? And I was like, oh my God, this makes sense. And so we started developing it from there using available technology. That technology was about, I would say, 230,000 points. By then, it was like a Frankenstein. If you've read the book, a hand from here, a heart from here, just to try and get that. Compared to today, I think we have technology models, the ChatGPTs that are in the billions, 70 billions, 400 billion, I'm told. Ours by then was only 230,000 points. So you can see how much has developed now. And yeah, so we developed that. We launched it at Imperial College in London. And the name Winnie was inspired by the first person that we served, that we brought a case to conclusion. She was called Winnie. And it was a case of her, a widow, here in Uganda, in Kampala, that her husband had died and she was kicked out of the house. And this was very early in Barefoot Law's days, 2013, 2014. So we're able to help her to recover the house and went ahead to provide her justice. She set up a business, and for her, looking at the turn her life had gone just because she was given basic legal information and guidance was proof that the concept works, but also was an inspiration. So we said, why can't she then go ahead and start providing the same guidance to people? So when we came up with a model, we called it Winnie. So Winnie went from being, by then we still call them beneficiaries, to being an AI lawyer. And that was the inspiration. And Winnie, the technology by then was still rudimentary, and of course issues because that Winnie would just go, look into the database, pick up things, and bring. So it wasn't really accurate. But so we used it to improve efficiency of lawyers internally to try and reduce on the speed at which we responded. So Winnie reduced our speed from about 72 hours to less than 24 hours for a response. And that was why she was designed mostly for internal efficiency. The technology was not good enough to directly provide responses to users, which it does now today. Not us, but globally.
Yeah.
AI has really developed.
Okay, so
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but first build up Winnie for us properly, because you think it's about 200,000, 70 billion. Me and my friend Ferdinand, who is on the call, we don't understand these things. Maybe my friend Ashraf Lukwago may understand the things, but for me and Ferdinand, we're a bit lost. So, break down for us, Winnie. Are you saying that if someone writes these very horrible demand letters to Barefoot Law, they can be answered by a machine? And and maybe also, I know Alfred for sure is lost. So maybe let's also allow him. Joy looks like she was understanding 70,000, but Alfred, I am sure, doesn't know even what AI you are talking about. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how much you want to dream, but the truth is, I remember, again, this is one of the stories. I met Sam Altman at the World Economic Forum in 2024, and he was going for a panel discussion.
and you have to tell us who that is.
Sam Altman is the founder of OpenAI. He's I think, he's not the first, but he's definitely the most prominent large language model AI person globally. So I met him and I asked
And
him.
OpenAI is the guys that do ChatGPT.
Yes, ChatGPT, and they were the first. They are like the benchmark. So I met him at one of those halls, and I asked him, "Do you have AGI?" AGI is artificial general intelligence, and he did not respond. And went away. He didn't really respond. But I could see there's something that's out there that we probably do not know. And I'm honestly convinced there is AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is a lot more advanced than what we have, which is AI. I honestly believe, again, this is one of those cuckoo moments. I honestly believe there are systems out there, there's software out there that can program a human being. What is limiting us from getting there is the hardware. We do not yet have the hardware we can build to build this biological entity that the software could run on. So, and of course, then after that, things about programming consciousness and the soul will come in, but that's I honestly believe that software exists, and that software, it's just a matter of time before it becomes publicly available. And that software, what's its implications for access to justice? Imagine you, Ellison, having a digital version that is more accurate than you in law, that operates 24/7 without rest and without pay.
That's like mercy.
What will it mean for judges? What will it mean for the justice system? So what Winnie pioneered was just a tiny, tiny step towards that. But again, it brings up more questions. Sorry again for going on this, on and on. It brings up questions of the guardrails. And that's something that when I remember when we launched Winnie at Imperial College in London, I went to one of those, what are they called, squares, one of those town squares, and just sat down and almost cried because of the implications this would have, not only for the legal profession, but for the globe. And from that point onwards, also my attention shifted from developing this to trying to set up the guardrails. We cannot keep developing this technology without making sure we overcome some of the unintended consequences. So it's exciting, but you have to really, really be alive to the unintended consequences, which are, in a few years' time, this technology will be more accurate than any of us in this room. And that's something we need to be mindful of. And what are its implications for the law and for access to justice going forward? What does that mean for you and me going forward? So that's Winnie. Winnie is like, in terms of development, if ChatGPT is like at a PhD level, Winnie was like a 2-day-old baby. But you see life and potential, but it's still a long way. But today, we are much more advanced with the big tech companies.
So, thank you. Maybe before we leave that Winnie bit, why the name Winnie and not maybe Sheila, Alfred, or even Mercy here? Why Winnie? Why the name Winnie?
Yeah, like I mentioned, Winnie was our first beneficiary, the first person we served in about 2013, 2014 that we served conclusively.
Yes.
So that inspired us, and so when we made this machine, it was only logical that we created Winnie. But she has since given birth to 2 children, Cynthia and Carla.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those who are gender sensitive were wondering why Winnie, but now we understand why Winnie, because it was the first client. So because now, just in relation to that, you see you have spent now, I think 12 years using technology to bring law closer to the people. And now with AI coming on board, there are very many fears around AI. The point that even people think to replace lawyers very soon. But you have used technology to serve people for all that long. So with those biases regarding AI, inassurance, misuse, especially for the communities which you serve, how do you ensure that we build trust in the legal technology and even AI and several other things to make sure that it actually helps the people and doesn't harm them? Thank you.
Honestly, I don't think there is anything like legal technology. I don't think there is anything like building trust in legal technology. It's like me asking you, how do you build trust in your pen? Trust in your book? How do I build trust in my shirt? These are just tools that we use. This technology is just tools that we use. We do not build trust in them. We build trust in us as human beings. And that takes me back to what I said before. The ultimate law is humanity. Garbage in, garbage out. It's like a book. A book, no one ever credits the big pen or the typewriter that wrote a book. No one ever credits your laptop for writing that demand note. You know, you don't put written on Lenovo XP3. You know, written on Samsung phone, written on iPhone Pro Max. No one ever credits that. Why then should we?
iPhone Pro Max 15.
Pro Max 15. You see, no one ever credits these because these are just tools signed by my fountain pen, $200,000 fountain pen. These are just tools. The trust is us as human beings. How do we build trust in the services that we provide? these technologies are just there to make our work more efficient. But we have to be very careful again and be mindful of the guardrails. And that takes us back to how we design the use of these technologies, especially at grassroots communities. I remember when we set up this first virtual center about 5 years ago and put on the TV for a lawyer on that side to speak to the guys this side in a local language. Some guys almost freaked out. The only time they had seen someone someone speaking on TV was either for news or something. But now here is a person you're speaking to two-way. Mm-hmm. It almost caused issues in usage. And again, that brings us down to something called the uncanny valley. It's like when you look at our laws and when you look at the systems that we have, these are systems that are designed for life. No law applies to someone that's not born. No law applies to someone that's dead. You don't have rights. So if I go to a mortuary, for instance, and I see someone blinking, I will freak out. Mm. That's the same reaction people get with some of these technologies, depending on how remote I would say they are or how advanced the society is. If I go to a rural community and I put a TV and people see the TV speaking to them, they may freak out. But if I go to an advanced community and they see a TV, it's something they're used to. So when you're designing these technologies and when you want people to have trust in these technologies, you have to understand where they're coming from and how then to implement these technologies to them. Our idea at first was put this, people come and talk to a lawyer virtually. But then for the first 3 months, people were not coming. Those that were coming would take off their shoes and sometimes fear to engage in this. So what we did was we had a lawyer sit in and get these guys used to the system. I remember for that same thing, we set up a booking system. You come, you book, a lawyer is automatically given to you to sort of talk. But we realized guys are going to the gardens in the morning. No one is going to come twice to talk to a lawyer. And I remember that's some of the challenges we had with virtual courts during COVID. Court opens at 9. Women are in the gardens up to midday. How you expect her to come to Zoom, to come and talk to? So the only way to build trust is to understand the population and design technologies that sort of enhance that lifestyle as opposed to technologies that we bring from outside towards that. So again, the ultimate law is humanity. These are just tools, garbage in, garbage out. Try as much as possible to have people, to have humanity at the center of the tools that you're designing. And that's, I think, how you build trust. You don't build trust in the system, you build trust in the people behind the system. I don't know how many of you are following the Grok issue on Twitter. You saw what happened today? Grok, I think, went rogue. And Grok is the AI, the Twitter AI, and started saying things and started doing things. And they just had to shut it off because the guardrails were guardrails that had sort of gone haywire. So that's unfortunately what the technology does if we don't build the guardrails.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gerald. If you're just joining us, we are discussing access deferred or access delivered and innovation with Barefoot Law. And Gerald Abila, the founder of Barefoot Law. And you're joining us on Judicial Service Conversations. And we've had the opening part of this conversation has been technology focused and focused on the development of AI and of Barefoot Law, and maybe we'll have 1 or 2 questions around there, and then we'll get to the questions that get our blood boiling here. But before that, I'm sure Mercy has a very quick question.
Yes, I do have. When you're talking about this AI and the guardrails and everything else, I know we interacted with voices like pushing the idea of telemedicine. And you know, telemedicine. And then that phone would when you have certain issues, you feed that form of information, your status, your HIV status, your malaria, all these other issues about you. But what happened when you national organizations? And I think that's one of the things. If I'm a lawyer here in Kampala and I have access to ChatGPT, I do know what type of information I put in there and the but if you're dealing with vulnerable communities in town, rural areas, how much sure that whereas the AI and digital platforms, the information is actually protected because the information is actually sought for by different international bodies and all that. So what I know you've mentioned the guardrail, but do you think we're doing enough to ensure that these vulnerable communities are aware of their rights and will not misuse it?
Yeah, the truth is some of the most vulnerable communities I've seen are in Kampala. Me and you are vulnerable. I want us to sort of get out of that mindset of looking at certain communities as vulnerable. I know it comes to us as lawyers naturally. We sort of have this hierarchical thing of looking at people that we serve, and that I wouldn't call it derogation because sometimes there is no better word for it. I mean, look at the laws; they still talk about indigents, beneficiaries, things like that. There is no difference between those people and us. They know things that we do not know. They know certain access to justice issues that we do not. They are better at applying community law than us. So we should, because the challenge with putting ourselves in that mindset is we end up reducing the quality of service. We end up looking at them as needy, and we end up approaching them as that. The same systems, the same quality of trust that we should have for someone, let's say in Kampala, should be the same quality of trust and the same approach we should have for a rural community like this. If we are having servers that are encrypted, if we're having servers that are secure, if we're not allowing anyone's data to be shared, if we are following rules, then it should be the same for those that we serve there as it is for a highly paid client in Kampala. So we are, again, I would go back to what I said. There's a lot that's going on out there. I think the data that you have, that you've posted online already, is enough to create a digital version of yourself. Someone has probably created it. You just do not know, probably even in your own image rights. Your court arguments on Yuli, your Hansard arguments, all your submissions, all that has been used to probably, your social media has been used to probably create ChatGPT. What you put into that has probably been used to create a digital version of yourself. So we shouldn't, much as we are looking at this side, we should also look at some of these on side. So I think the first protection starts with you. The second protection starts with us, the people that are collecting the data. And it's something we strive to protect. We strive to have the data encrypted. We strive to focus on metadata. There's some data we don't collect as well. But yeah, so I think we should have the same quality of approach to everyone, because we are all the same, I think. We are all vulnerable. We are all one case away from bankruptcy. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Again, if you're just joining us, welcome to Judicial Service Conversations with Ellison Karahanga, Alfred Muyaka, Joy Mbabazi, and Mercy Chemutai Makabai. Colleagues and friends, we have a special guest today, Mr. Gerard Abila from Barefoot Law, and we're talking innovation, we're talking AI, but we're also talking access to justice. Now, one of the things which I've seen you guys speak about is something you call human-centered justice. What does that mean in practice? I know there are are they called caravans? Barefoot law boxes where people interact. If you could just take us through this idea. And maybe before you do, I just want to maybe before you do, I just want to just point out that we are. I just want to point out that we are. What would you call it? We are human-centered here. Our whole idea is that there must be access to justice. Is that the judiciary must be a service. Is that the courtrooms must not be buildings. They must be a service. That we cannot continue closing courts to do court censuses to find out how bad the situation is. And for us, that is our idea. We are, I don't know if we are barefooted in that regard. We are looking for, we're looking for stilettos maybe to step hard on and break toes. I don't know what they use stilettos for, but anyhow, maybe we are also barefooted in a way, but we're all about access to justice. So when you talk about this human, what you call human-centered justice, how does technology help? What does that mean, and how can it be rolled out not just from your perspective, but really in the wider sense? How can we start serving the people of the Republic of Uganda? I know we are global citizens, but in the place in the globe called Uganda, how can we? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ellison. You reminded me of one of my favorite books. Again, I'll go back to it. Songs of Lawino by Okot Bitek. There's a follow-up to that book, Songs of Ochol. Now, Lawino, in that book, was lamenting about her husband. For those that have done literature, especially at O level and A level, you've come across this book. Okot Bitek was one of Uganda's greatest writers, and he wrote this book about Lawino, an Acholi wife to Ochol. Now, Ochol was one of those men who, at independence, adopted everything the white man brought. And to him, everything the white man brought was good. Everything that was Acholi culture was bad. And so Lawino in that book is lamenting about her husband becoming someone she does not recognize, someone who despises her culture, someone who despises her custom, someone who despises the ways of his ancestors because he has discovered ways that he thought are newer. This country here, this land that you're calling Uganda, the first writings that were here, the first records are 12,000 years old, are the rock paintings in Nyero. Those are, approximately 12,000 years old. And I think we fool ourselves, or we tend to fool ourselves, if we think of justice in a colonial mindset. In a way, we tend to think of justice as it came about in the OICs of 1906 and 1926 and independence. And we tend to think of access to justice as such. But if you look at it from, again, I'll go back to Nyero. Those rocks have paintings that are interesting. Paintings about society, paintings about community, paintings about cows, paintings about the sun, paintings about harvest. All these were governed by rules. There was a sense of justice in those rock paintings. For some reason, we forgot. These rock paintings were 10,000 years before the Magna Carta, 10,000 years before the common law. But then we start thinking of our justice. In fact, when you're at law school, you start thinking of justice from the Magna Carta, 1055 and 12 something, and then the common law and the reception clauses. And we start thinking of human-centered design from that aspect, forgetting that our society was already a society that was human-centered in design. And if you go down to grassroots, the way they resolve a lot of these justice challenges are human-centered in design. It is this system that was brought from abroad that is a bit less human-centered in design, because it is a system that is contradictory in more ways than one to our common humanity. Our common humanity is a humanity that is reconciliatory in nature. It's a humanity that is less adversarial. It's a humanity that builds harmony. But here is a system that is retributive, a system that is one winner takes it all. It's a zero-sum system. That is a system that is less human-centered in design than a system that we've had for tens of thousands of years. So for me, the question is, we already see human-centered design at the grassroots. Why don't we see, or why are we seeing less human-centered design? I wouldn't call it formal, again, or informal, because what gives me the right to call our customary systems informal, and what makes this formal? So I'll call it the English common law system that we're using is a system that is retributive. It's not a system that is traditionally designed to create harmony. So in terms of looking at human-centered designs, I think it's already happening at community level, customary justice systems, Matoput and the rest. The question is, how do we already see it, how do we get it and apply it to this English common law system that we're using? And for us, it means, again, we go back to humanity. Humanity is our ultimate law, and it should be for everyone else. An example I would like to use is, if you go to some of these foreign countries, a bus stops and goes down on one side so everyone can access and step out. You go to the courtrooms and there is access for everyone. You know, you go to the loos and there is something for a disabled person. But when you come to some of our systems, they are systems that are not designed with people in mind. So I think when we're looking at human-centered designs, we need to go down to a community and build up with this community in mind. The Barefoot Law Box is an example of that. It's a system that tries to bring about a holistic justice approach at community level. It's not only formal, it brings the formal, I would use quotes, the informal, and everyone else that resolves justice issues. Going back to where we meet, again, what binds us? What drink is that binds us? I won't want to make adverts for anyone that's not paying for sponsorship, but in the spirit that binds us, the spirit that binds us is we are all problem solvers. The only difference is we solve problems using the formal justice system. Someone else solves problems using another justice system, but we are all problem solvers. What is our common humanity, and how can we enhance it? And what role in our approach does technology play?
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. As Mr. Swan was saying, I understand we serve on a global basis as per your guidance, but let's now come back to Uganda. You see, in Uganda today, we see a severe shortage of judicial officers. Recently, the Chief Justice noted that we need how many? 200 more? 20,000 more judicial officers if we were to deliver justice. The Chief Justice himself acknowledged that we need more 20,000 judicial officers to deliver justice. So because of that shortage of judicial officers, we have delayed resolution of cases. I think this brings us to the topic of today. There's too much access to justice which has been deferred. Other times it has been just denied. Actually, there's a quote I saw today where they say, justice denied is delayed, but again there's another bit of, just delayed is actually evil being done. So we are doing evil because of delaying justice. We are supporting Satan in courts. That's what Nicholas Opio told us. So we have entire districts where we don't have a judicial officer. Like It and people don't have access to the bench. Yet ideally we should be having at least a judicial officer per district, whereby at least I know from Kamule, I go there, from Namutumba, I have Sembatia, like per district. So in your work, you serve almost each district. So I want to understand how has this shortage of judicial officers affected the communities you serve in your work, and maybe what solution can we have to resolve that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alf. Again, I'll go back to songs of Lawino and songs of Ochol. Let us not be like Ochol. Let us not look at our justice system from a colonial perspective. The judicial officers are there. You just don't see them. Problems at grassroots level are getting resolved. No one is waiting for you lawyers. No one is waiting for you judges. Problems are getting resolved. Problems have been resolved for 12,000 years. The question we should ask is, are they being resolved correctly? How can we improve on this resolution? Are they being resolved in tandem with the laws that we have today? 40% of people that have these problems are going to witch doctors, to neighbors, to the police, to LCs, to customary leaders, to friends. Only 1%, 0.9% to be specific, are coming to the formal justice system. So problems are being resolved. They are not being resolved perfectly, but no one is waiting for you. In thinking like Ochol in Songs of Lawino, we tend to think that we have the monopoly of dispute or problem resolution in this country because we are lawyers and we're judges and we're trained, and they are waiting for us, and they are waiting for our judicial officers for them to get their problems solved. These problems are being resolved. They are being solved. The problem is they are not being solved correctly. They are not being resolved perfectly. And because of that, we tend to see unintended consequences because of this improper dispute resolution. Some of the problems are not finished. Some end up causing more problems in resolution. I mean, I think I've been into communities where banishment is still being applied, where women are being forced off land. And that is a problem that is being resolved by people at the grassroots, by judicial officers at the grassroots, by community leaders, by LCs, by policemen, by clan leaders. So the question for us, knowing a bit more what the law is, how can we enhance or how can we harness this dispute resolution at grassroots level and bring it in tandem with the law? How can we improve on those that are already there resolving these problems? There are more than 20,000 at grassroots level. What role can we play? What role can the judiciary play? What role can the government play? What role can lawyers play in making this dispute resolution more in tandem with the law? And I think that is one way to overcome this access to justice challenge, to get out of this contraption, to get out of the formal justice system mindset, and to go a bit out of this box and to steer this dispute resolution and make it more in line with our laws, in line with our constitution. If it means getting formally trained judicial officers, even better. Is there a way we can embed these judicial officers, these 20,000, in these communities? Is there a way they can be attached with some of these dispute resolutions at the grassroots? I remember there was a law that applied specifically to Karamoja. I think it was the Karamoja Decree, one of those that had a jury in handling judicial disputes involving issues in Karamoja. There was a jury of peers that were there to guide the judicial officer on customs and practices of the Karamojong, to try and make sure, and this were cultural leaders, religious leaders, to try and guide that dispute resolution. That system is not in operation anymore. I think it was a pre-colonial system. But how can we have such innovations today to overcome the challenges we are seeing at grassroots? But let us get ourselves out of this contraption that people at grassroots are waiting for us, the lawyers, for us, the judges, to come and resolve their problems. People are not resolving problems because they are waiting for courts. No one is waiting for courts. Problems are getting resolved. how can we enhance this resolution and bring it more in line with the law? But directly to your question, again, a lack of access to justice is evil. Trust me, the things I've seen, the outcomes of someone being denied justice is satanic, I would say. And the person that said that, quote, justice delayed is evil, is right, is absolutely right. And from a country perspective, the truth is a lack of access to justice makes people poorer. It leads to poverty, period. It makes people poorer because their minds are so encompassed with this legal problem they have, but also their money that should have been going into productive things are trying to be used to overcome these challenges that they are facing when it comes to access to justice. So for us to, honestly, I believe this country would be probably 10 or 20 times richer than we are if we had proper dispute resolution mechanisms at grassroots level, but also at national level. The inefficiencies that we are facing in dispute resolution, should we overcome those, a lot of human potential will be unlocked. A lot of national potential will be unlocked. I read a statistic, I don't know how much is locked in, I think 18 trillion. Do you know what percentage that is of the national budget? And that is in the formal justice system. You can imagine how many lands are not being sold, how many buildings are not being built, how many gardens are not being farmed because there's a dispute on land. There are cases we've handled at grassroots level. There's one case, a dispute that lasted about 30 years. We're able to handle it in about 6 months through, negotiation, and about less than a year after that dispute was handled, the person had built a nice house and was using that to pay for herself, to pay fees for people. Beautiful house in the village. It's commercial. Some of these inefficiencies, I remember one of the cases we dealt with was a lady called Pasculina, and this was again in 2016. Pasculina suffered a misfortune. It was a land conflict, and both her hands were cut off by a neighbor over a boundary demarcation. So we came across that case in 2016, and we helped her to resolve it, and the guy was eventually imprisoned. She got back her land and went ahead to utilize it later on for farming. But Pasculina's case, Pasculina was at a place called Oyam, a district called Oyam, and she had to travel to the High Court in Lira. Her case was, so she has no hands. She has to wake up in the morning, dress up, call her relatives, get a border about 2 kilometers to the main road, get a bus about 90 kilometers to the court in Lira, and then carry witnesses, about 5 witnesses each time. The case was adjourned 27 times. All Pasculina accessed justice. You can imagine, 27 times you're transporting 5 people 90 kilometers for years. So you can imagine how much out of her pocket she tried to use to access justice. And this is just one case. Extrapolate that across the country, and then you understand what an inefficient system of dispute resolution causes. So it unlocks, it blocks human potential, and it blocks national potential. It's not only evil, but it leads to poverty. We probably would have been a middle-income country if we fine-tuned or made our justice resolution systems more efficient. I think now is the time to be bold and have some of these systems in place.
Okay, so you're just joining us. You've just heard the sad story of Pasculina, which is the story of our justice system. Traveled during 90 kilometers, 27 adjournments. 27 adjournments. Absolutely incredible. That's something that we should get someone to write a letter about. Those who are joining us, we're having judicial service conversations with Gerard Abila, and we are discussing innovation, but we're also discussing access to justice. We're also being told really some horror stories about injustice, and also about the potential that is being held up, the ripple effect of that 18 trillion tied up in commercial disputes. And I will, and also the fact that that lack of court, lack of access to justice is a hindrance to our economy. Although I heard you saying that there are very many centers of justice, and that for you gave examples of witch doctors. I think if they're witch doctors, we can't embed judicial officers there. Those are resolving matters in another dispensation. But maybe Mercy
Listen,
can
maybe I can push back a bit on that. What do you mean by judicial officers?
no. I think let's first chill pushing back. I think
No, because
when
I think,
things become metaphysical, we may not be able to.
No, because I think if we are to tackle some of these problems, if we are to overcome these challenges, we need to change our mindsets. A judicial officer is someone who dispenses justice, in my opinion. Is it the formal justice system? Is it an informal justice system? Ultimately, they are officials at whichever level that are dispensing justice. I'm not advertising, but if you travel around these Kampala streets on these poles, there is one guy, I think the last time he was called Dr. Munyoro, that helps you with court cases, recovering lost loves you have seen, land disputes. So that's dispensing justice, that's a judicial officer. We are limiting our...
I think that judicial officer also deals with a lot of biological functions. But let us...
Yes. He does that.
Let's have Mercy. Let's have Mercy just throwing a question, because I see her dying.
Okay, maybe just to comment, I was just thinking, Kawale, if you were right on the lake,
Yes.
and this punishment island is where they were taking villages, I was happy to find that island empty. Because ultimately, those are people who are making decisions in those years. But the island stands, and it's a testament to what was happening and what justice in our communities can look like if we do not have the law integrated with how justice is being dispensed in these different communities. So I really appreciate that point. I do want to ask you a question. You have traversed obviously throughout Africa. I think that you launched a program in Kenya, Malawi, and I think you mentioned The Hague as well. But from an African context, do you think Uganda, which has been on this journey of increasing or improving access to justice for the marginalized groups of people, and I know you mentioned that we are all vulnerable and all that, but ultimately there are groups of people who are more vulnerable, I'd say, or marginalized, maybe because of economic issues, maybe because of their gender, maybe because of their positioning in life. So ultimately, do you think Uganda has more mileage in dealing with this issue of access to justice, improving access to justice for these groups of people compared to these other countries, or are we miles behind?
Thank you. Again, I think that is a perception that some are more marginalized than others, or some are more marginalized than us. We are probably more marginalized than them. It depends on what your understanding of marginalization is. But in terms of justice and in terms of access to justice, again, I go back to the past. If you go back to these rock paintings, 12,000 years ago, we knew how to write. But when you come to our history, we started writing because Alexander Mackay got a printing press and started teaching people how to read and write. And now then he translated the Bible into Luganda, and now that is how people learned how to read and write. But we have rock paintings that were 12,000 years before Alexander Mackay came, that were already representing community rules, that were already representing justice, that were already representing us as a people. So I think in terms of innovation, that is a perfect example of a Ugandan judicial innovation, the rock paintings at Nyero. But somewhere, somehow, and it's not only Nyero, there are several places that have rock paintings, and in those you have community rules. Cattle are here, things are here. But somewhere, somehow, I think we slowed down. One of, I think, the best innovations Uganda ever had around justice were JLOS. When JLOS came through, JLOS was such a groundbreaker, not only in Uganda, but globally, that it served as a benchmark for across the world in how you bring people together. Another innovation we've had is Matoput. That really, really, really helped worldwide. And of course, something I'm really, really impressed about, like you mentioned, was the RC courts that eventually became the LC courts. That's another justice innovation. So in terms of innovation around justice and access to justice, Uganda has a 12,000-year, I would say, head start or blueprint. But again, how does this compare to the rest of the world? If you go to Kenya, we've done a study in all these countries about the state of access to justice about 2 years ago. Uganda, the biggest problem when it comes to access to justice is access, starting from access to information. I think access to information in Uganda is at about 11%, according to the research that we did. In Kenya, it's 27%. So the biggest problem in Kenya is not information, but services. So the innovations in Kenya are mostly innovations around services, while here it's mostly about information. Malawi, the beauty about Malawi is how they integrate chiefs and traditional leaders. I found that really, really impressive. And it's something that we can learn in our LC courts. Our LC courts are integrated, but not that well. In Malawi, it's properly integrated. The main challenge facing access to justice in the Netherlands is cost. It's not information, but it's cost. Accessing a lawyer is one of the most expensive services you'll find. So the innovations that side are innovations that not provide information alone, but innovations that reduce on costs. So in terms of innovation, ecosystem innovation, Uganda is in a good place. But in terms of integration with other justice ecosystem ways of resolving challenges, I think we lack a bit of momentum. And I don't know, probably it's because a lot of funding was cut off to this space. I really don't know, but also probably it's a mentality of us lawyers and judges. We sort of underlook or downplay efforts of those that are not us by giving ourselves, one of the cool words I've learned today is a judicial officer. Has to be someone that is trained and passed and certified by a colonial justice system. So my Dr. Munyoro, who is putting things on those polls, is not a judicial officer. The traditional chief that is handling all these cases at grassroots, in our opinion, is not a judicial officer. So it is that mentality that has hindered access to justice at community level. So it starts with the mind, and I think that's why we are losing a head start. I mean, Matoput, the UN has adopted this in many countries. Go to some of these universities, it's been studied at PhD level, but go to our courts here in Kampala, ask them, tell them you want Matoput as a system to resolve, and it's not being taken up. So why don't we have, and I'm sure every community in Uganda has something similar, but we're not integrating them in our justice system. And I think that's part of where the challenge lies.
Thank you. Again, if you're joining us right now, we are with Mr. Gerard Abila from Barefoot Law, giving us some bare facts. Giving us some bare facts. We are at an interesting place, and I've had judicial innovations in Uganda, 12,000 years of judicial history. The fact that we were writing before, I had never looked at it like that. We were writing before, and we need to stop looking at ourselves through a colonial mindset. I want us to go to another issue, an issue we've discussed on these spaces for a very long time. Access to the formal justice system through our courts. And Article 142, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Many of the people who are joining us will have known our views on Article 142.2. Article 142, Clause 2, for those who don't know, provides that where the state of the business of the courts so requires, advocates basically can be, in case there's backlog, someone doesn't have to go for 27 adjournments, or getting a border without hands, getting a bus, carrying 5 witnesses 27 times on a case to bring justice to someone who cut off both of their hands. If there's an absence of judicial officers to hear this, we are saying get the people who are trained, and not just Dr. Munyoro. That's Dr. Munyoro, who is not just a judicial officer, but at times is also a medical officer, and a spiritual officer, a police officer,
It's only one.
a police officer, a lab doctor. I think he has no separation of powers. But not just that doctor, but on a serious note, if we can bring this idea of mission-based judges, where do you stand on this, or on this issue of mission-based judges? And when you look at rural areas, if you could just, because as barefoot law, you actually interact with people. So if you could, first of all, maybe just give us a few more, what was her name? Pascolinas. If you could just, I think many people don't understand really how bad this situation is. Are there more Pascolinas you've seen? And could this idea really help to make sure that women, men, people are not entering a justice system where they are being condemned again, where they are suffering again because of lack of presence of judicial officers? That people. Alfred says it's evil not to deliver justice. This evil, can you tell us about this evil that's being meted, and if this sort of idea could help? If it's one of the, it is an innovation in my view that was contained in the 1995 Constitution, but that we have never had the imagination to incorporate. So you imagine, before you even talk about Dr. who? Dr. Munyoro. Before you incorporate Dr. Munyoro, the judicial system has found it very difficult to incorporate Professor Juko, Professor Sempewa in sitting down and hearing judicial disputes without having a full-time job. So, the other day they told some people, wait for your turn. We have many cases, wait for yours, like Okonko. I have many debts, wait for me to pay yours. I think this maybe as Dr. Munyoro is waiting for his turn, do you think we should really incorporate as well the legal profession? Over to you. And anyone who's joining us, thank you for joining us. We're having this conversation right now, the usual judicial service conversations. Nobody is stopping this reggae.
Yeah, thanks, Ellison. Again, remember we're talking about 1%, 0.9% to be specific. Mm-hmm. There is 99.3% or 99.1% out there that are resolving problems outside of this 0.9% system that we are talking about. There's a term I like to use, and something I came up when I was reading again this book, Songs of Lawino and Songs of Ochol. A lot of us lawyers have adopted this colonial justice system in its fullness, that we are like Ochol. So the term I use is Lochol. That is a lawyer who is Ochol. So let's not be Lochols. And it starts with a mindset. Again, I'll go back to what you said, Ellison. What makes it formal? in your introduction, you mentioned the formal justice system, and I ask again, what makes it formal? If we are looking at this as formal, then the other is informal.
We are too colonized.
It's a mindset thing, because the other one is informal. These are not courts of record. They are beneficiaries. They are indigents. It's a mindset thing. We need to decolonize our minds. There is no formal, there is no informal. People face problems. They come to us, and they want...
Amen.
Yeah, they face problems, and they come to us to give them solutions. The question for me then is, if we are looking at it as one problem-solving aspect of society, what role do mission-based judges play? How can they enhance this problem-solving at community level? How can they help with overcoming these challenges we are facing? And it's a good initiative, it's a good idea if implemented, and if implemented correctly. I think the best way to implement it is to look at these mission-based judges as pollinators. Like if you look at a flower, these are people that are coming to grassroots to pollinate already existing systems, to make them more efficient, and to make them resolve these cases in tandem with the law, as opposed to going in isolation to try and resolve these problems at grassroots level. So if looked at as pollinators to improve on dispute resolution at grassroots level, then I think it's an innovation that will rank up there with the jailhouse institutions that we had. But if not implemented properly, we'll end up missing an opportunity, I think, like so many more that we've missed. But again, in our minds, we shouldn't forget, we are talking about the 0.9%. So what role can us, the 0.9%, play in the 99.1%? And I think that role is best through pollination, while reserving what you called the formal justice system for things that are a bit more serious and more contentious. But a lot of these can be resolved outside of that system.
I think I've never looked at the implementation of Article 142 to see, looking at it from the pollination approach. The approach of not just going as judicially appointed officers, but working with it to actually achieve, a multi-pronged approach, working with the courts and the as well. So thinking about the role that these officers will be playing, one of the worries people have expressed is that these judicial officers, all these officers, will not be able to be independent in their approach. And the reason why they will not be independent in their approach is a broad perspective from appointment of temporary judges, which would mean that they are looking for appointments, and therefore they will have certain opinions rather than the right opinions, or in implementing the law as it is, based off the facts and the cases that they have before them. So do you think there are other safeguards? And I mean, looking also at the approach of the community-based justice, I think there's a need for a lot of independence in the minds of these officers, because you're dealing with your neighbor, for instance. You're dealing, so just, do you think there are other safeguards that we need to consider? And do you think that we will be able to achieve independence in the judicial officers while implementing this idea of mission-based judges?
Thanks for that. You reminded me of Mexico. I think Mexico came up with an innovation. They said there's a lot of issues with the judiciary. Let people elect judicial officers. And so judicial officers are now elected in Mexico. Like, I think it's Mexico. I need to cross-check. Like
even the U.S.
Even in the U.S., like politicians. And the reason they gave was, people know which judicial officers are effective. So in case they're effective, they'll keep electing them. So the judicial officers are put to standard by the people that they serve. But again, going back, songs of Lawino and songs of Ochol. I keep going back there because I think we need to decolonize our minds. And one of the things to really decolonize is some of these concepts. And we seem to be fine with them. I mean, like independence, independence. What independence does a clan leader have? What independence does an LC court have? You see, what independence does a cultural leader have? And yet people go to them to have their problems resolved, and they live happily and contented. We're a society of communal. We are communal in nature. The common word is Ubuntu. We do not operate in isolation. And yet we are bringing a system that is designed for operation in isolation and trying to fit it into our communal nature of things. We still have land that is communally owned. What independence is there in case of a land conflict? You will go to the clan leader who is a relative of your grandmother's aunt, and that's where you'll go to have this dispute resolved. So I think as we are applying these concepts at community level and nationally, we need to step back a bit from some of these principles and avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think independence is, first get the system to work, and then we will improve it. There are many ways of overcoming bias. There are many ways of overcoming this independence. For instance, you could have that jury of community peers.
Yes.
Watch over these judicial officers to guide them, but also to make sure their decisions are not decisions that are arbitrary. But do not avoid sending someone to community level. Do not avoid appointing a mission-based judge because you fear they may be not independent. So you're going to waste a lot of time trying to overcome a challenge that community has already overcome for 12,000 years. So, yeah. So figure out a way, get these mission-based judges at community level, and then you will overcome the perception of bias, or you will deal with those independence issues later. The thing with innovation is you build as you're flying. You don't wait to get a perfect plane and then you fly. You build, you improve as you're moving. So I think that issue of independence is an issue that mostly comes in the English common law system, but at community level, we are more communal. So how do we merge the two? And we can only find out if we start. Get these mission-based judges at community level and deal with some of these unintended consequences as we move on. But I don't think the biggest issue at that level is independence. The biggest issue is the resolution of the dispute, which is what they want. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that approach. And now to continue, they said the lawyer's lawyer keeps saying that nobody can stop reggae. So in that vid, I'm wondering, you have brilliant ideas and you've come up with something that is really working as you keep pushing us to merging. And I think you brought out something very important that we shouldn't look at other people who, just because they're different from us and we think that we are the salvation or the savior that the community is waiting for. People already have things that they are doing, like over time, they're resolving their own issues. And so in that mode or system, do you think Barefoot Law or any similar platforms would be willing to partner with the judiciary to identify areas that are most in need of urgent judicial intervention and maybe help map a way going forward? What do you think?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, people are already solving problems. We can only try and help them to solve these problems better. And that, to me, is what my understanding of a mission-based judge or this people-centered approach. No one is waiting for you. I know it comes as a surprise to many lawyers. You've spent 6 years at law school. You've practiced for 10 years. You're now on the bench. But the hard truth is no one is waiting for you. In fact, in some communities, they don't give a damn. They don't. They have ways in which they resolve disputes, but a lot of them are contrary to our laws, are contrary to humanity, contrary to our principles. You mentioned the punishment island. Still happening in some communities. Punishments like that still take place. I know one community up in the north where someone was, I think, caught stealing something, and he was sentenced to corporal punishment, to death. And he was beaten and he died. So these things still happen, but what we can do is to help pollinate. And Barefoot Law, as an institution, has this as one of the 4 cornerstones of our strategic plan. And we've been doing it since we started. We've been working with justice actors at a national and a community level. And it's something that we intend to really, really increase or enhance going forward. So to that question, the answer is yes. And it's an area that we look forward to collaborations with, because I believe there are so many lessons that we can share.
That's what I'm thinking from you. Shall add it to our book. I do have a question along the lines of this issue of colonization and decolonization. But I think the way I'm going to package it is you have been definitely your travels, you've interacted with a number of people who have, I would want to say their own opinions of what justice looks like in Africa and what it should look like. And I would like to know, because you do this work on a day-to-day, what misinterpretations or misunderstandings, or has your opinion on justice from an African perspective contradicted with their opinion? And how far apart are those opinions?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't. Africa is not a country, But I'll look at, but I understand what you mean. And Africa is us, me and you. Their opinions, strangely, are not different from ours. Us learned friends, they all think there is no other system. They think justice does not exist. And they think the judicial system was brought by the colonial government. And they are blind to all other justice systems that exist. And unfortunately, that's a mentality that many of us in this space keep perpetuating. As lawyers and as judges, we keep thinking of ourselves as formal and the other systems as informal. So for them, everything is formal. There is no informality. So they get surprised when something like Matoput comes out of Uganda. They get surprised when something like Barefoot Law comes out of Uganda. They get surprised when you tell them we have rock paintings in Nero while they were still in the dark ages and were already dispensing justice. They get surprised when you tell them our concept of justice is one that is reconciliatory, that is harmonious in nature, because theirs is so adversarial. And it's a zero-sum. There's a winner and there's a loser. But I think their biggest surprise is when they look at our system, it is a system they left 100 years ago with very little change. So we are still, when did the Indian Evidence Act come? Was it 1886 or 1888? Yeah, to them we are still in the reception clause days. We've barely reformed, because some of the laws that we have are laws that they got rid of in their system years and decades ago. So I think they get surprised that we've stuck to some of them. They get surprised at our backlog because we are so stuck on formality with very little innovation. And again, they get surprised how we imitate them with very little very little reforms. So I think I would also be surprised. And in fact, it's something that really surprises me, how we could have such a beautiful system of dispute resolution, but we just do not merge them with what we have formally. So some of their misconceptions, unfortunately, are misconceptions we also have here about ourselves, especially about our justice and judicial system. In fact, I remember one of the first programs of that Barefoot Law appeared on in an international media. First gave a background of Uganda, and of course Uganda's wars, Uganda's conflict, Idi Amin, and they're like, but you won't believe something like this, Barefoot Law came out of a country like that. And that is why it made news. So you see, so many of these misconceptions we perpetuate in thought and in action. And that's why I've been reminding you since the program started, don't be Ochol, don't be a Lochol. There is no informality, there is no formality. Don't fall into that trap. Decolonize your mind. There are no beneficiaries, there are no indigents. You know, decolonize your mind, and then you'll clearly start seeing solutions. And that decolonization sort of comes with putting people at the center of the things.
You know, you are reaching the tail end of the conversation and you have started receiving questions from the audience. I will want so just to remind any person who has a question, you can share in the comment section, or you can request for a microphone to speak. Shall add you as a speaker. So I will first use this chance to ask the question from the audience before I go to my question. Madam Rachel was asking what you think about the full digitization of the courts in Uganda. Is it a good idea? Is it even a tangible idea which can be worked on? Thank you.
Again, at the beginning of this conversation, I said this conversation will only make sense if it makes sense for those that come 25 years from now, one generation. If it does not make sense one generation from now, then it won't make sense, not even for us today. One question I ask you is 25 years from now, do you see the courts not digitized? You see?
You can never know.
I think 25 years from now, the courts will be fully digitized. You will have artificial judges giving decisions. You will have decisions given on the fly. You will have a jury of peers that are artificial in nature. You will have lawyers that are artificial in nature submitting artificial arguments before artificial judges for solutions for us that are real people. It will be digitized to that extent. And you will have issues of rights of these digital lawyers that are applying for justice in that case. So there is, of course, there are unintended consequences, but the benefits far outweigh the unintended consequences. And I know it's a slow process. It's a very slow process, but we will get there eventually. So solutions to access to justice greatly hinge on digitization and mentality.
So I think Madam Rachel has been answered. So any other one who has a question, you can share it in the comment section, or you can request for microphone to speak. Now I can get back to my question. You know, as we look sort of things for the future, we must now look at the now. I'm sure you have seen letters or correspondences moving around with as long as I'm still breathing, nothing is going to happen. But still, you have seen letters from the CJ, the DCJ, ULS. It is also becoming an era of letters. But since you have now solutions to solve as of now, my question is, if you had just 1 minute, or let's say 2 minutes, with the Chief Justice and the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, what would you urge them to do right now to bring justice to the people who need it most, so that we stop committing evil? Because we're already committing evil and we need to stop as soon as yesterday. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. But I guess I would reverse it and ask, if the Chief Justice and the Minister of Justice had 1 minute with me, what questions would they ask?
Or what questions should they ask?
What questions should they ask? And are they the right questions? You see, because I've been in this for 12 years now, making 13. There are things about application of digitization and the law. There are things about legal service delivery at grassroots level that need to be probed further. So I think, unfortunately, I'm not them, so I would not imagine what questions they would ask. But if I was to ask them to ask some questions, or if I was to imply to them to ask some questions, I would imply them to ask questions about what they think about the justice system 1 generation from now, and what they think their legacy will be in getting us there. Especially, and I think there's a lot in this 99% that is out of the 1% justice system that we deal with. So the questions that I think I would like them to ask is, what should our legacy as a generation be in making access to justice a livable reality for those that come 1 generation after us? And I think we each have a role to play. Ellison, you have a role to play. Alfred, you have a role to play. I have a role to play. Dorcas has a role to play. What role are we playing in getting us there? Are we being lochol, applying the system with little modification, or are we starting to look at things in a new way? Maybe that's our legacy, one of transformation. And I think those are questions I would welcome on the next version of this podcast.
Those are questions you'd welcome from the Chief Justice.
And the Minister of Justice. Because I'm just a small man, they hold big offices. With those offices, you can achieve tremendous impact. And I know it's slow, but if we sort of steer ourselves towards that direction in future, we will get there. So I think, and that's the thing with, again, before I move on from that, not only to the Chief Justice and the Minister of Justice, but to all of us, we should learn to ask answers, not questions. Garbage in, garbage out. So we should learn to ask answers, because the question asking is now taken over by prompts.
Okay. And just to build up on Alfred's question, when my Lord the Chief Justice asks, what should the legacy of a Chief Justice be? As a person who has handled 1 million clients in 12 years, what would you answer him?
In that regard, I would tell him we're at an inflection point with technology, and a lot of things that were impossible are now possible, and we should just learn to leverage it. We should know that we were writing 12,000 years ago. We had access to justice 12,000 years ago. We've been in this phase for 100 years, but there is a disconnect between the 12,000 years and this 100 years. I think a proper legacy would be one that leverages technology to bridge that gap between what, Ellison, you called the informal and the formal justice system. So I think
I'm corrected.
At this point in time, we are all, what do they say? We are all superheroes with these tools. They were not available by the time many of us even started.
Those are smartphones.
Yes, smartphones. What was that statistic? What was those? I think this watch, this is a bit more advanced, but there were those Casios. Remember those Casios, the 128 kilobytes?
Yes.
The data banks. Those Casios, I think those are saying they had more technology than the computers that sent Saturn V, the Apollo project, on one smartphone. So you can imagine what, on one...
That's the project to the moon.
That's the thing to the moon. You can imagine what the smartphones now give us. And I think there's a role here for the Chief Justice and administrators of the judiciary, or those that are in positions of influence in the justice system, to bridge that gap and unlock the potential in the 99%. And I think that given that this is an inflection points create legacies. And I think the only legacy that can be created at this inflection point is one of using digitization to improve access to justice and its administration, and to bridge the gaps between the formal and informal justice system. And I think the first place to improve is efficiency. Solutions are already available. There's a lot that is lost in inefficient delivery of justice. And I think those are low-hanging fruits that anyone should get to build a legacy.
And just one last question there. Someone is asking, what does inflection point mean?
Okay. Every time in history has a point at which things happen that determine the destiny for generations to come. The inflection point now is being brought about by technology, and it's only going to improve. So I think we can leverage that to determine our destiny, but also our purpose. I wouldn't say, like, for you, Ellison, I would say your legacy should not be of someone that wrote the best planes. You know, with your vantage point now, how do you leverage these technologies to change the way we think about the law? You know, not only to deliver justice, but to change perceptions.
Especially when I'm on the Judicial Service Commission.
Like we say, inshallah. Yeah. Sorry, don't forget us when you get there. Just saying. Remember us.
Sure he will. He's the lawyer's lawyer.
I shall make sure the Chief Justice asks you those questions.
Yeah, I'll come prepared.
So technology is working. We'll have access to it. We're digital. Well, you've talked about, I think, addressing the young lawyer, but also any other lawyer. Remember, you said something to do with if we want to get wherever it is we want to get, we have to do, what was that? 3 things: do it now, do it well, and do it in the right time. Right now, in the right time, right? Do it on time. Thank you. So you've shared quite a number of things and what you think should be done to get where we want to get. Among the highlight, I think, is lawyers and everybody who is wearing this coat we need to get off our high horses and know that we are not that important. We need to get away from all that, and then that is how our brains are going to be able to think of solutions that are affecting the real people, human beings, which we are as well. So I want to ask, in your perspective, in the event that we took up all these ideas maybe and we started doing what you're talking about, which is very brilliant, if we are to fast forward to 10 years, where do you think it would be? Because I think you talked about 25 years and you said everything will be digitized. Probably Winnie will have great-grandchildren, like we will be there. So, but if we bring it down to 10 years, where do you think it would be? And I think from there you could also share, I know you've talked about Song of Lawino. Is it Song of Lawino, right? Yeah, quite a lot, which I feel like is informing most of the work that you're doing. Is there any other book or books that you think you have read or that have impacted you and that you would really share with any person out there that should probably pick up a leaf or a whole tree and get to somewhere close to where you are in transforming the way we are receiving justice in the country and Uganda at large? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Again, I'll put on my... I like to call myself sometimes a legal futurist. So what we do in legal futurism is we try to imagine the world in future, come back to the present and sometimes to the past, and see how we can guide ourselves to that point to imagine 10 years from now, you need to first imagine what the world will look like. The world moves in development cycles. The first cycle was 15 years for the MDGs, some of you remember, 2000 to 2014, the Millennium Development Goals that ended, and then a new cycle came. That new cycle was the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that are ending in 2030. Then a new cycle will come. The question for us is, what will that new cycle look like? Because that will be the latter half of the 10 years. I honestly think access to justice will play a more prominent role in that new development cycle, same as technology, of course. But the world is changing currently. A lot of the systems that we grew up comfortably with are being thrown out of the window. We are going to a multipolar type of world. The justice systems that we knew, the Nuremberg trials, the post-World War II, the Bretton Woods institutions, it's all changing. What does that mean for access to justice? What does that mean for legal practice? What does that mean for international law? If I'm a lawyer now that plans to start practicing in 10 years, what will that mean for me?
Just sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The Bretton Woods is the World Bank, the IMF.
Yes. After World War II,
World
these
War
are the world order that we have. Right?
I'm just helping Alfred.
Okay. For Alfred's sake, after the World War II, the current system that we use was to a large extent formulated. But we're at an inflection point again where a lot of this system is starting to change. And that will affect 10 years from now. What does that look like for me and you? What does that look like for us? A lot of technology is coming. There's a lot of space exploration. What does it mean for me in my legal practice today? You see, in terms, and I'll focus again on technology. What does that mean in terms of conflict? Because the systems that prevented this conflict are being unrattled. You know, the ICC and the rest are all sort of being challenged. The world is undergoing turbulences. What does that mean for access to justice 10 years from now? What does it mean for legal practice 10 years from now? But I think, again, the biggest inflection point is technology. And where do we see this technology going? You're going to have artificial general intelligence between 2027 to 2030. This is like going to be super more intelligent than what you're already seeing now with paid-for versions of ChatGPT and the rest. So that's coming. That's going to mimic human beings a lot more than human beings. And then you're going to see a lot of discussions about rights of these beings and how to treat them. You're going to see, in terms of justice, like I said, you're going to see on your bench, a lot of justice will be digitized. You won't need 20,000 lawyers anymore. You'll just need one system that will dispense justice to an equivalent of maybe 200,000 judges. So justice will be digitized to an extent that judicial decisions will be digitized, not digitized in that you scan or you type and you upload on EFRIS, but digitized in a way that you're going to have digital judges delivering decisions for real life. What does that mean for access to justice? A lot of your work is going to be automated as lawyers. One person will probably be as powerful as 1,000 lawyers, one lawyer. But then, in terms of practice, that means even a P7 dropout will be able to come to use these systems to develop submissions, to draft contracts, to develop pleadings, and even to argue them in court. What does that mean for you as a lawyer? You see, and this is, I'm trying to look at 10 years from now. And so you will have a lot of these digital systems. In terms of practice, I think, if you look at, we now have mediation. You know, you'll have those hearings before you go into the main suit. There's that encouragement, guys, first sit down and talk it over. I feel 10 years from now, there will be an encouragement for mediation between the parties. There will be many of those. But then after mediation, you'll have an option either to have your decision by a virtual judge or a real judge. And I think you will be mandated to first go to a virtual judge before you appear before a real judge. I think that will come up in 10 years. Maybe not in Uganda, but somewhere around the world. And within a year, it's like TikTok. The moment it's viral in the US, it will be here. So you'll have virtual judges, virtual decisions for real life, and of course, virtual. You lawyers will be so supported by technology that it will be ubiquitous. You won't even be having a lot of these arguments. You will have superhuman capabilities. And now what will it mean for justice if I click plaint, and my plaint is submitted. You also click plaint, and it's submitted to an artificial judge to deliver a decision. So it will now be machines arguing against machines in front of a machine judge before we go to the human being. What does that mean for you? Again, for you as a lawyer, for you as a person coming into this space, especially for the young lawyers and those that will listen to us 25 years from now, know that the ultimate law is humanity. And those that will be rewarded are those that are trustworthy. So you should aim to develop your humanity, because the machines will handle all the legalese or the legality. So if you don't have these skills as a human being, you will be overridden by a machine, and that means you need to focus on ADR. You need to focus on developing skills to resolve disputes, mediation and arbitrations and what. In terms of books, of course, I recommend Songs of Lawino and Songs of Ochol. Don't be Lochol. Lochol is a lawyer who is so engrossed in an archaic legal system that they fail to see beauty in what is around them. The law is beautiful. It's imperfect, but it's beautiful. Don't let all these negativities surrounding it take away from the beauty that the law is. It's beautiful. It's like religion in most cases. It's beautiful. Just because a pastor was caught up in something does not mean religion ceases to be beautiful. Same with the law. The law is beautiful. And it's something I want all the young lawyers to know. It's a beautiful profession. It's a beautiful tool. It's the most powerful tool you can use to do God's work. It's a religious book from India. And so many others. You really need spirituality, especially in these days of great technology disruption. Our spirituality, our humanity sort of protects us from many of these unintended consequences. If these tools find you empty, it's garbage in, garbage out. And those are the unintended consequences. So the two books are Songs of Lawino. Get the one, there are two. There is one that is only Songs of Lawino, then there is one that is only Songs of Ochol, but there is one that is 2-in-1. That way you can follow through. And then, of course, a religious book of your choosing. If possible, read more than one.
I must say, we're really about to wind up, and we have got two people who are on who will ask. But I must say, my friend and brother, Nicholas Opio, was on last week, and he recommended Song of Elohim. Although the quote he gave may not be appropriate for us to repeat at this time. I think we've got two questions. There are two questions. One from Mr. Lukwago and one from Mr. Adit. That is one question each, 1 minute. Let's start with Lukwago.
So immediately.
Let's take him as well.
Thank you, Mr. Abira Gerard. I have two questions, but I'll try to make them brief as possible. Maybe the first question is about Winnie. Yeah, in future, I don't know whether she's already transforming access to to access to justice, which will be incredibly impactful, but it also raises important ethical questions. As its designer, can you walk us through how Winnie was built to uphold professional ethics in the legal field? Specifically, how does it ensure accuracy in its legal guidance, avoid biases that could unfairly affect users, and protect sensitive information to maintain client confidentiality, especially given the complex and personal nature of the legal issue at hand? So the final question would be like, in Uganda, to practice, you must be an enrolled advocate and you must renew your practicing certificate yearly with a fee to ensure you meet these professional standards. How does Winnie, as an AI providing legal advice, align or navigate these regulatory requirements? Is it designed to complete the work of the advocate, or does it operate in a separate space to provide access to justice without replacing the need for critical profession?
Yeah, thanks for those.
Yes, sorry, there's also one other question. So, this is a question from Esther Akulo, who is listening. She's listening all the way from Canada. She says, how can we attain economic justice? Because poverty is a social evil. And do you think religion or deep social beliefs have caused Ugandans more loss of natural ways of doing things, and therefore we've become more artificial? We are the ones who are artificial intelligence. And God's work seems to be successful elsewhere. Developing countries doing it differently. So are we the artificial intelligence?
Yeah, interesting questions. I forget the names.
Mark.
Mark, you need to get yourself out of where we are today and try and look at things a bit more holistically, especially knowing what you've seen. I know you've seen much because of the questions that you've asked. These are issues of ethics. You cannot ask these questions unless you've thought about them, you see. But we're getting to a point where we'll be asked, how does an advocate do an AI's work ethically? We are still at a point where we're asking how an AI does an advocate's work ethically. But in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll be asking, how does an advocate do an AI's work ethically? Because all this work, most of it will be done by an AI. Again, these are tools, garbage in, garbage out. It's like your pen that you're using. I'm glad you're left-handed. I'm also left-handed. I don't know what brand of pen you're using, but in the end,
You must be using Bic.
he's using a Serena pen. But at the end of the day, it is the content that you've written that counts, not the brand of the pen. There are so many of these tools, and we lose focus when we focus on the tools and not on the people that are using the tools. I remember when we were developing Winnie, one of the questions we asked, okay, Winnie, what is widow inheritance? And the response that she would give was, widow inheritance is a widow inheriting things from the husband. But me and you know, widow inheritance is a surviving relative taking on a wife, but it did not have context. It was not aware, it did not have awareness. And so what we did, and that is why we never allowed it to provide direct responses to end users, it only by then improved on the advocate's work. So it was a tool to improve efficiency, and that's it. So the control was in having a human in the loop. And it is what we're all doing today with all these tools that are now available. And I guess that also helps to control the bias that you mentioned and all the others. In terms of the question that came in online, there are two things that you need to be mindful of at this stage, but these won't be issues going forward, especially as technology improves. One is hallucination. Hallucination is those fake citations. And let's be real. Once in our profession, maybe as students or in practice, we all hallucinated. In those, as students, we hallucinated in those responses. In Sebagereka versus Nalumansi, East African Court of Appeal, 1964, and you cite a principle. So there was always hallucination, and it happens. There is nothing new with these things. You just have to be mindful that you're not perpetuating this hallucination. The fake citations happen by the machines, but they also happen with us in practice. So the same controls that happen in practice should be the same controls that happen in that case. But again, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. To the question that came in all the way from Canada, are we the artificial intelligence? It's an interesting question because then it gets you to think what's natural. You see, maybe we're an artificial intelligence. I have no answer, but it's an interesting way to look at it. But I think, again, like I said about religion and spirituality, it's like the law. There is beauty in it. We should not disregard it because the beauty is being shielded from our sides. So, and it's wrong. I think it's wrong to say the Lord seems to be working in other places and not Uganda because of things that you see. Because again, you lose out on the beauty of this land. You lose out on the blessings that the Lord has given us as a nation, I would say. Like I said, the Lord gave us Nyero rocks. We started to write 12,000 years while others were still in the dark ages. Isn't that beautiful? Why then should I blame the Lord now? So I think, yeah, for me there is beauty and something we need to perpetuate. But thanks for the questions. They're indeed interesting. But again, the caveat is it's the technology, the space is developing so fast, no one has answers. All we are sharing are thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jared. And if you're just joining us, you're joining us at the tail end of what has been a fascinating and educative conversation. We have learned things we never knew and discussed things that we've never discussed on these spaces. We've gone from the traditional knowledge, the history of 12,000 years, from the writings on the Nyero rock paintings, to the decolonization of our minds, to thinking that writing started when Mutesa wrote a letter in the Daily Telegraph. Yet, in fact, we were writing before the British had written what they call the Magna Carta. That we had systems of rules in place long before. We have moved to the traditional knowledge systems and also the pride in our own cultures, the Song of Lawino and understanding, to AI, to built-up AI, to what's going to happen 25 years from now, the depth of history, the knowledge of the present, and the ambition of the future. I think by all accounts, this has been a fantastic space. And we are very grateful to you, Gerard. And now maybe, if I could just ask you to give us your parting shots. What we had asked you, if you have the Chief Justice, what you would tell him, and you corrected, not corrected, but you changed the paradigm to say, what would he tell you? And now we have with you members of the public, members from all over the world, and quite a number of members of the Uganda Law Society. And let's say you have a chance to have parting shots with them. What would you tell them?
I'll tell them to be more human. Just that we seem to forget our humanity. We look at decolonization I think decolonization happens both in practice and in doctrine. But we seem so stuck up in this system that we've had for 100 years, we forget our common humanity. I honestly think us as lawyers are there to bring out the beauty in the law. We are God's hand to do God's work, irrespective of who you call God. And we should, that is something we should amplify. And I think we tend to know this as law students in the first 4 years. But after LDC, something happens. By the time we get into practice, a lot more happens. Until we get to the tail end of our lives, to the sunset of our lives, then we start realizing it's a gift I was given, and now I need purpose. And you start looking for purpose, but the body does not have energy. So what I'm saying is start preparing for that purpose now, because you will need it in the sunset of your days. And the only way you can prepare for that is be human. Let us write our planes, let us use those Latin words, but let us decolonize our approach. Let us be human. We're as vulnerable as they are, we're as needy as they are. But again, at the end of the day, the ultimate law is humanity. So, and we need it now more than ever because of the tech disruptions we are facing.
So, friends and colleagues, you've had it here. Be human. We have now come to the end of this conversation. I think it has been a deep and powerful conversation, and Gerard, we are very grateful for it. Right now, there's a lot happening within the Uganda Law Society, for those who know. There's a lot of activity happening within the Uganda Law Society. Certainly, there will be a lot of activity before the end of this week. And for many people, reggae looks like it's being stopped. But I just want to assure you that it will not be stopped, and we shall be having conversations on that very soon. But for our conversation today, thank you so much, Gerard. For all those who have joined us, thank you so much. We cannot read from the Song of Lawino, but we shall, however, make reference to the Song of Matovu. And we shall end today by saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to everybody who has joined us from wherever you've joined us from. And we shall end with those wonderful words from the Song of Matovu. Olemujawa, Musaja Singanze.
Thank you, Ellison. Thanks, everyone.
No, we missed it.